Okay, we are in Acts 24. I said for the second time. And in 24, we're still in the midst of Paul's chaos in Jerusalem, but I was thinking about the term proselyte. I don't remember why. I got into discussion with somebody this past week, and I started thinking about the word proselyte.
Yeah.
So back in the day, we've talked about the social caste system. You have the senatorial class and the equestrian class from which the governors were usually drawn. So Pontius Pilate was probably a member of the equestrian class. They're all Romans. They have other kinds of Romans. Paul was a Roman. The tribune at the Antonia Fortress is a Roman, of course. Festus, Felix, and then Festus are Romans. And then you work your way down, and you have the common laborer, and you have women, and you have children, and you have these various social classes. They're quite distinct from each other, and that are acknowledged by everyone as classes, which Paul was dealing with to some extent in the church in Corinth, and to a great extent, where they would separate and they would eat. And you have poor people with rich people, or well-to-do people. The well-to-do people are eating, and therefore shaming the poor people, and maybe even doing it on purpose. I don't know what you think about that. But all these forces are coming into play, and Paul was trying to stamp that out. So 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians mostly, is the textbook case of dealing with the Greco-Roman social caste system. Would you agree with that, Pastor? It's just you cannot have it in the church, where you're supposed to have one united people of God consisting of Jew and Greek, slave and free, male and female, and others, where there are no second-class citizens. And so Corinth is a textbook case of that. Corinth was a leading city of Achaia, the province of Achaia, very important city, cosmopolitan, and all these forces come into play. But here, there's also a spiritual caste system that comes into play in Palestine. You have at the top, of course, the Jew, and then categorically below the Jew, and a chasm which can never be bridged, you have the proselyte, the Gentile who submits to Moses, who formally submits to Moses by having himself circumcised. And he puts himself under the law, but he still is not a Jew. He's a proselyte. You see that proselyte presence in Acts 2. Luke himself makes the distinction right here when he catalogs who's present in Jerusalem for the festival when the day of Pentecost happens. And at the end of it, he says, visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes. So he distinguishes between the two. Then you have, actually, I was going to point out too, you see one in the leadership of the early church, even before the conversion of Samaria. The last person mentioned on the group of 7 that was appointed by the church to take care of the needs of the church. The last one, and the only one that's named, is a proselyte from Antioch. It was actually a Gentile among the Palestinian Jews of Jerusalem, appointed a Gentile as one of the 7 elders of the church in Jerusalem. An extraordinary moment. Right there, a chasm has been crossed by the Jews. Everybody's aware that he's not a Jew, he's a proselyte. But they did it well before Peter had his aha moment with Cornelius in Acts 10. Or the conversion of Samaria, which is another aha moment. I happened before all that stuff. So it's it's like one of those little details, the little things that shows you what is happening just under the momentum of the church, of the growth of the church under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, not planned by anyone. This man, Nicholas, finds himself one of the elders of a church full of Palestinian Jews. What did the Palestinian Jews think of that? Well, they appointed him. Peter said, choose for yourselves, choose from among yourselves 7 who can do these things. And they chose as one, Nicholas, proselyte from a Gentile city, a Roman colony. Extraordinary moment in the history of redemption. So anyway, whoops, go away. Robert, how do I get there? It is. We'll get back to the Vesuvius later. Okay. I don't want to get sidetracked. It's 9:33. So there's the proselyte. Then there's the God-fearer, who is a Gentile, who attaches himself, who worships God according to the customs, the Jewish customs, but doesn't formally submit by being circumcised. So they were all allowed, I think, although maybe that's not even true. Were God-fearers allowed to worship in the synagogue? I don't know that they were. It's possible that Luke is referring to proselytes as God-fearers, and Paul as well. The Jews and you who fear God, he says in one of the synagogues. I forget which one. It's possible that he doesn't want to say proselyte. He just calls them God-fearers, but it's possible that they didn't even allow the God-fearing Gentiles to attach themselves to the synagogue. And then last, of course, is the pagan Gentile. So the point is that here's something interesting, Robert. Check this out. This program that opens the pictures, I get this now after a while. It just disappears. Huh. Where was here? Now I have to find it. Where did I put that? It's the Antonia Fortress. So here's the Antonia Fortress. I got to open them up one at a time. Here's the Antonia. Here's the temple with the Antonia Fortress that we've seen so many times. I get tired of it. And here's a rather graphic display of that spiritual caste system built right into the temple precincts. So here's the court of the Gentiles with a wall that even the proselyte was not allowed to violate. So the point is that the proclamation of the gospel is a proclamation of the obsolescence of the end of the very idea of the proselyte. It's gone as a category. And with it, the category of Jew and Gentile.
Wouldn't you say, to some extent, there is still a wall, but the wall is to keep the Jew out. Today, with them not accepting Christ as the Messiah, there is some type of wall there.
There has been some kind of, I don't know what you got to be careful with this stuff.
Yeah, the wall isn't the right answer.
Some kind of,
because Christ offers it to everybody.
God is doing something to bring,
Self-constructed, constructed wall.
God is doing something to bring in the Gentiles. And in some way, for the moment, he has set aside some other things that were happening. And eventually he will pick those things up again. Is that general enough to be safe? I don't know. So that's what we're getting at here is Romans 9 through 11. You can read that. And the thing that you're talking about, I think, is it Romans, it's 9 or 10, where Paul talks about partial hardening has occurred among the Jews so that the fullness of the Gentiles may be brought in. And then he will bring in the Jews. So there's something of the plan, but yeah, assuming we do Romans next, we'll be talking about that at length. But anyway, this very idea of the court of the Gentiles goes away because we see the end in Christ, in his death and resurrection, in the proclamation. We see the end of the proselyte, and there is simply the disciple, which is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. It's an extraordinary thing that we all benefit from. You don't have to become a Jew to become a Christian. You don't have to be a Jew to be a child of Abraham. You don't have to have any attachment to Moses whatsoever, any devotion to Moses whatsoever. You don't even have to know who the man was. yet you can be a child of Abraham because of what Christ did. Extraordinary thing. That's one of the reasons that I like looking at this thing. It's another little thing, you know, you think it's just telling you, oh, this is what the temple looked like and where people were allowed to go. Oh, it's doing far, far more than that. It's just such a graphic display of the way things were so that we can appreciate, in my view, the way things are in Christ. The history of redemption. God acting in history to bring about the end of the proselyte and replace it with something far, far better. Okay. That's that. Anybody want to say anything about it? Okay, so we're at the place now where Paul has been dragged before Felix again. The Jews are now in Caesarea. Where are we on the ground? We're in Caesarea. Huh. How can I not have, oh, I don't need it. Right here. We're in Caesarea. Here's Caesarea right here in Samaria, or what the Jews thought of as Samaria. Probably not accidentally, but midway across the land here. So we're the seat of Roman administration of the whole Palestinian area, but also of the Roman province of Judea. Galilee was not a Roman province. We will see another king up there, and that king is going to be Agrippa II. But the Roman governors are still ruling over Galilee. I mean, Judea at the moment. Pontius Pilate was one of them. Now we're in Felix's reign, 52 to 58 or so AD. So that's Caesarea, largely Gentile. One of the great ironies is that that's not mentioned in Acts is that Felix is in trouble. There's the revolutionary fever is rising, and there's more civil disturbances, and specifically in Caesarea, the Jews are not getting along with the Gentiles, and it will get so bad that in 58, Felix will be recalled back to Rome, and they will go 2 years without a governor until Festus arrives. And so this foment is happening, and he apparently can't control it. He's lost the support of his brother, Pallas, P-A-L-L-U-S. Paul is P-A-U-L-O-S, maybe, or something like that. Very close. For some reason, they don't call Pallas Pal, but they call Paulus Paul. I don't know why they do that. Anyway, he was a advisor to Nero, who's the governor. I mean, the Caesar right now, the emperor. He has been deposed by 58, and so this guy, Felix, no longer has a brother in the inner circle to protect him. So he's going to get recalled about the same time. It's not in Acts, but that's the backstory. Probably has something to do with Felix's posture right here, where he's treading very lightly with the Jews, even though he knows the man is innocent, like Lysias did, the tribune, and like Festus and Agrippa II will shortly. He knows it. He doesn't want to run afoul of the Jews because they know his weakness. It's politics. They all know the politics of the situation. And they'll be back in Rome complaining about Felix. So he doesn't want any of that. So he's trying to, as he'll say, as the text will say in a minute, do the Jews a favor. But anyway, there's Tertullus here, a Roman orator, lawyer, whatever you want to call him, a professional talker of some kind, who is standing before Felix on behalf of the Jews who want Paul brought back to Jerusalem. And he gives this ridiculous flattery to a governor that everybody knows was a ruthless tyrant. He's the guy that I told you last week that Tacitus, the Roman historian from the second half of the century, said he had he ruled as king with the mind of a slave, I think is Tacitus's epitaph on Felix. Because he was a slave. He was a freedman. Okay. That's enough of that. That's flattery. Let's move on to, so we'll go ahead and read it and then continue on. So here comes Ananias, the high priest, who was also ruthless and very unpopular and pro-Roman, because you didn't become high priest unless you were pro-Roman, because the high priest was appointed, selected by the Romans. So you probably got selected because you greased the wheels and knew this guy or that guy and gave away bribes and stuff like that, because that's how things work and still do. He comes down. Here comes Tertullus with the Jews. They bring charges against Paul. Here comes the statement to the governor: since we have through you attained much peace, and since by your providence reforms are being carried out for this nation, none of which was true, we acknowledge this in every way, and in every way, most excellent Felix, with all thankfulness. It's incredibly insincere. But that I may not weary you any further. If they didn't want to weary him, they wouldn't be there right now. I beg you, grant us by your kindness a brief hearing. He had no kindness. For we have found this man a real pest. You could also translate that word pestilence. We have found this man a pestilence. Everybody know what a pestilence is in English? I'm not saying it's the same. It's more than a bug. It's the consequence of a bug, right? The Black Plague was a pestilence. So that's anachronistic. You don't want to read back that definition into, but I just find it interesting. So don't listen to anything I just said. He's a real pest. That's probably an accurate translation. A fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Pharisees.
Nazarenes.
I'm sorry, the sect of the Pharisees. Sect of the Nazarenes. Thank you. We'll get back to that. Where did I stop here? Yeah. 9. And he even tried to desecrate the temple. That's all right. I was looking for my line. He even tried to desecrate the temple. Doesn't explain how, by what means. And then we arrested him. Well, is that true? What actually happened? Let's try to, yeah. Now, you'll notice the brackets right there. Versus, I forgot my book.
6b.
Is that what we're talking about, Pastor? The bracketing on that? Okay, I'm not even gonna, no, let's just let it go. So let's just pretend like it's part of the text and we'll talk about it and go with it from there. I feel like getting into it. If you're wondering why that's bracketed off, we can talk about it offline. We wanted to judge him according to our own law, but Lysias, the commander, came along and with much violence took him out of our hands, ordering his accusers to come before you. End of bracket. So assuming that that's in the original text, it's not true at all. They were committing the violence. Lysias came in, brought an end to it, stopped the violence, and dragged Paul out of there before he could be killed. By examining him, meaning Paul, yourself, concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things of which we accuse him. What a fascinating tactic. Get back to it. And then the Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that these things were so. So he distinguishes between Tertullus and the Jews for some reason, almost as if Tertullus is not really a Jew, which is entirely possible. He could just be a Roman they hired who's good at this. But at any rate, he offers no evidence. He makes a bunch of accusations, and then he invites Felix to examine Paul and have Paul implicate himself. He makes the charge, he desecrated the temple. Now, Felix, why don't you examine Paul and see if you can get him to say that he desecrated the temple, to say something that amounts to desecration of the temple. But he offers no evidence for it. He just simply asserts it. So back to the Nazarenes, let's go back and look at some of this. The sect of the Nazarenes, that's an interesting statement right there. First of all, Tertullus calls the Christians, the disciples, let's call them the disciples, the group itself is a sect, which is exactly the same word that's used of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The sect of the Pharisees, the sect of the Sadducees, the sect of the Nazarenes. So we have this new kid on the block in sectarian Judaism. You have Pharisees that we know of, or that I care about. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, the Zealots, or what was that, it begins with an S, Sakari or something like that. I forget what it is. The revolutionaries. I don't think you call the Herodians, or just a loyalty to Herod, I guess. I don't know. People who were people who supported the Hellenization of Palestine or something like that, which Herod did. And now you have the sect of what they call the Nazarenes. So is it a neutral term? No, it's not neutral. Jesus was called a Nazarene 5 times. And in every single case, it would be in Acts, it would be a derogatory term. This Nazarene, says one of the counsel to Peter early in one of the trials. I think he refers to Jesus as this Nazarene. It's this insult. And so they're the Nazarenes, the sect of the Nazarenes, this new arrival in sectarian Judaism. Anything more to say about that?
What was Samson?
That's a completely different, he was a Nazarite, although it's never said that Samson was a Nazarite.
He was promised to.
That word Nazarite has nothing to do with the place of Nazareth. Yeah. John the Baptist may have also been a Nazarite. Paul took a vow, which you could describe as a Nazarite vow.
No cutting of hair,
Yeah, that kind of thing.
eating weird stuff.
Samuel was a Nazarite from birth, but that has nothing to do with the city of Nazareth, nor being a Nazarene here.
Coming from Nazareth.
Okay, so verse 6, that's the only accusation that matters. He tried to desecrate the temple. That's like me going to court and saying he tried to murder me. Go ahead and ask him.
It's become an attempt to, it started out as he did. The original accusation is that he did.
Right. Now he tried to. Yeah, he attempted to. Yeah, that's I didn't notice that. That's a good point. Yeah. Now, Felix, see if you can get him to say it. Because really, we don't have him. We don't have the Asian Jews here who saw it happen to offer evidence against him. So we really don't have any evidence. But maybe if we're lucky, when you're talking to Paul, Paul will implicate himself. Right? So back to what I was about to say. He tried to murder me. Go ahead and ask him. And I've been asked, did you try to murder him? No, I didn't try to murder. What do you want me to give him the case for him? You know, that's the kind of thing that's going on here. It's an extraordinary moment. I mean, there's so much insight, not just into the gospel, but into the way things worked in first century Roman politics and interactions between Jews and Gentiles and Jews and Romans and so forth. You just have to notice it. But this is the only accusation that matters. He doesn't care about, Felix doesn't care at all about any of the religious controversies. The fact that he's a member of a religious sect, blah, wah, wah, wah. I don't care about any of that. But this part right here, that's a big deal. He tried to desecrate the temple. Doesn't explain how, what means. Just moves on. Gallio in Achaia, remember he got dragged before Gallio by the Jews. Gallio didn't care either. This was a matter, oh Jews, of wrongdoing, meaning violation of Roman law. I would bear with you. I would tolerate you. But as it's a matter of religious law, deal with it yourselves. And he drove them from the judgment seat. He was angry that they wasted his, basically they wasted his time. Felix is going to have more patience with these people because he's in trouble and he doesn't want to run afoul of. That's why Paul is not getting out after this trial, if you want to call it a trial. So not only were they not intending to judge Paul fairly, they intended on murdering him. We'll find out that in a little bit later. In Luke 23, regarding the accusations against Jesus, it was threefold. Also equally vague, misleading our nation, forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is a king. That's what they brought to the governor. Before the Sanhedrin, they talked about his blasphemy by claiming to be the Messiah. Pontius Pilate couldn't possibly care less about that. So suddenly, from the time that they're in the Sanhedrin till they get before Pilate, there was no mention of forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar. in the Sanhedrin. That's for Pilate's consumption, because that's a big deal. And suddenly we go from Messiah to king, because then now you're talking treason. So more insight into first century political speak. Okay. So the Jews are not so much asking for a favor. I'm sorry, they're not so much asking for a ruling as they are a favor. That's what Tertullus started with, right? You give us a brief hearing and hand him back over to us, because one of your guys, Lysias, took him out of our hands when we were about to judge him according to our law. Your guy did the illegal thing while we were conducting ourselves according to Roman law. Your guy came in and took him away from us, assuming that that part of the text is true. So all we're asking you to do is to give him back to us so we can,
Just don't mention Paul being a Roman here.
no, they're not going to bring it up. Felix knows that. The Jews joined in the attack and said that these things were so. So Luke refers to the proceedings not as if it was an examination, but more like as if it was an attack by a mob of some kind. And the only thing keeping their hands off of Paul is this Roman governor. Okay, so that's that. That's the end of his statement. Now the governor, so you might ask yourself, where in the world did Luke get this information? Well, this is a we section, in a sense. Luke is here. Luke arrived in Jerusalem with Paul. So it's a decent bet that he's one of the people that's in Caesarea with Paul. So he may very well, if Paul is allowed to have attendance or assistance during this, he may very well be in the presence of the governor right now. If not, he certainly has access to people who did. So we get a very, very blow by blow description of what happened. Other times he's very perfunctory. It's very, very short. Here, it's very lengthy, like the Ephesian statement was, his last statement to the elders of Ephesus. That was lengthy, implying that he was there, which he was, or somebody was that he had access to, because it made its way into the narrative. I think these guys wrote down a lot of stuff. I don't know. I don't know what they wrote it on, but on the other hand, they wouldn't have had a lot of writing material. I don't know. Yeah, count me as those who firmly believe that IQ has not risen over time. I don't know where we would get that idea.
The ability to do this is possible.
Yeah, their training of memory was without question. Memory was a top priority to these people, because that's how you kept your traditions alive. We are hang our heads in shame in that area in comparison. Yeah, they didn't have that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, verse 10. When the governor had nodded for him to speak, Paul responded. Leave that little detail right there. Somebody saw him nod for him to speak without saying anything. Somebody saw the governor go like that, and then Paul started talking, and that's how it got recorded. The governor didn't say, you may speak now. He just simply turned and nodded at him. This little local color. Now here's Paul's opening statement. Let's see if you can detect any flattery. Knowing that for many years you have been judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. Since you are governor, yes, you are governor, so I will happily make my defense to you. Since you can take note of the fact that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. He gets right to it. Notice the specifics, 12 days, as opposed to Tertullus' generality. Neither in the temple nor in the synagogues, it's a categorical refutation, nor in the city itself, temple, synagogue, city, did they find me carrying on a discussion with anyone or causing a riot. Not only did I not cause a riot, I wasn't even speaking about my supposed sectarian beliefs. I didn't come to Jerusalem to do that. We'll get to that in a second. Nor can they prove to you the charges of which they now accuse me, which we just pointed out too. But this I admit to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, it's great correction, I do serve the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. I gotta stop here. Having a hope in God, there it is, he refers to the resurrection of the dead as a hope again, which these men cherish themselves, implying that they're Pharisaical in their beliefs. That there certain shall, except for the high priest, he certainly wouldn't be. That there certainly shall be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. That's an interesting statement because it means the high priest would not be a Pharisee. He'd almost certainly be a Sadducee, denying the resurrection, and others, but apparently they had Pharisees there. So it's like this group effort to get Paul found guilty. So he's talking, he's still talking in some kind of solidarity with the Pharisees, which he did previously when he yelled, I am on trial here today for the hope of the resurrection of the dead. I'm a Pharisee. I'm a Pharisee, the son of Pharisees. I'm on trial for the resurrection of the dead. He says that, and then the Pharisees start taking up his cause. But now the Pharisees and Sadducees have joined forces to try to get him back to Jerusalem. But he's talking to the Pharisees, almost as if he's still trying to get to woo them over to his side or something like that. In fact, now that I look at it, I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's still working on the common ground that he has with the Pharisees. In view of this, I also do my best to maintain always a blameless conscience, both before God and before man. That's what he said roughly. They got him slapped before the council earlier when Ananias ordered the soldier to slap him. He said something like that. Now, so there's his general refutation. I categorically deny all the charges. Not only am I a law-abiding Roman, he just doesn't say Roman. I'm also a law-abiding devout Jew. So he categorically across the board denies all charges. Now he gets a little more specific. After several years, actually it's 5, I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings, in which they found me occupied in the temple, having been purified, according to the law, without any crowd or uproar. But there were some Jews from Asia, the specifics, who ought to have been present before you and to make accusation if they should have anything against me, which they didn't show up. Why didn't they show up? They certainly could have kept them there. So this is, remember why he's here in Jerusalem. No good deed goes unpunished, as we used to say in the Navy. Concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so do you also. This is how you're to take up the collections of the saints. I will send them with letters to carry your gift to Jerusalem. And if it is fitting for me to go also, they will go with me. So he's planning on this ministry outreach to Jerusalem on behalf of the Gentile churches. Sort of like, almost like he believes the Gentile churches do have some kind of debt to honor the church in Jerusalem as the mother church or something like that. And so they took up a collection to help the Jews, the disciples in Jerusalem who are having a tough go of it. Look, if you're a whatever shoemaker in Corinth and you become a disciple of Jesus, all the shoemakers don't rise up and kick you out of the guild, right? They don't care. To get cast out of this temple, you just don't go back to the temple. Nobody's looking for any fidelity to the temple. You just participate or not. But in Jerusalem, if you divide yourself from traditional Judaism, from Moses, you're cast out. I mean, you're in big trouble in Jerusalem. So that's what's happened in Jerusalem. So these Gentile converts, empathy, they're wanting to help their Jewish brethren, the people that originally didn't even want them as part, it's this ironic turn of events. But anyway, that's why he's in Jerusalem. So he's talking about this presenting offering. He calls it alms and to present offerings. The alms would be what he brought with him. And the offerings would be the offerings for the 4 men that were under a vow. No good deed goes unpunished. So he comes to Jerusalem to deliver charity to the saints, that deed isn't going to go unpunished. And also, he was only in the temple because James and the brethren asked him to go show his solidarity with Judaism by offering to pay the expenses of four men that were coming out of a vow. So that's the present offerings, and that deed didn't go unpunished. So he's not going to win.
Spent 5 days of the 12 in Caesarea. And he spent several remaining days in the purification rites.
Yeah.
So one of his points is
Yeah.
he didn't even have time to start a
Yeah.
riot, let alone.
I obeyed. I was faithful to the law down to the smallest detail. I was purified for my act of presenting the offerings. I think that's what he's getting at right there. I don't really know what that entails, but okay. Or else, let's see, or else let these men themselves tell what misdeed they found, because they haven't said it, when I stood before the council, other than for this one statement, which I shouted out while standing among them for the resurrection of the dead, I am on trial before you today, which the Pharisees on the council already believe anyway. So they're not going to do that. He didn't go to Jerusalem to preach. He's going to drop off the ministry for the saints, as he calls it, in the collection for the saints, as he calls it in 1 Corinthians. And probably he was going to be on his way to Rome. And that's all going to happen. It's just going to take a little longer. He's going to get to Rome in a way that he hadn't anticipated. But he didn't go there to preach. He wasn't in the synagogues like Stephen was. He didn't do any of that stuff. Peter caused more trouble for the Sanhedrin than Paul did. They might never have known Paul was there. He goes in, he drops off the collection, he goes to the temple, he presents the offerings, he comes back, he says hello to people. They have a kegger of some kind, a first century kegger. They finish, and then he's off to Jerusalem. He's off to Rome or something like that, you know. I don't know. Not pass that on to your grandfather. Okay. Oh, Vic's in here too. I blame it on the disorientation. I suddenly got disoriented. I got disoriented for 4 seconds, but I'm back to normal now. Okay. So Christianity is an extension of Pharisaicalism, but the extension is heretical. Pharisaicalism was not heretical, but the Christian extension of it into belief in the crucified and resurrected Messiah is. Luke has used the term "the way" that he's described what they call the sect of the Nazarenes, the way, 6 times. It's also used by the slave girl that was following after Paul, that he eventually got mad and turned around and cast out the demon. She also called it the way, which is interesting. Okay. Acts 23:1, I maintain a clean conscience before God and men, slapped. Now he says exactly the same thing before Felix. And not just for clean conscience, not just regarding Moses, but Moses, the temple, and also Jesus. I'm completely innocent. I haven't run afoul of anyone here. Listen to the recitation of what happened. The last visit to Jerusalem was at least 5 years ago, Acts 18, at the end of his second missionary journey. Actual accusers were not present. I'm just running through my notes to see what I missed. So one of the important points of this is that the Palestinian Jews were not present to see Paul in the temple. And so none of the people at the trial actually saw it happen. And they didn't bother to bring anyone who claims that they did. And I'm sure the Asian Jews will want no part of going before a Roman governor and telling a great big old fib. So they probably were gone. I don't know. Well, they're doing it right here, but pretty brazen. Okay. 22. Anybody want to say anything about all that? Felix, having a more exact knowledge of the way, neither do I. We're going to find him interested in the gospel. Paul, he's going to make a point of it that a little bit that Paul talked to him quite frequently. So that may have already happened. Maybe he had already had a private interview with Paul or more than one. And he already knew something about this, or he did his own research or something. I don't know. Or he followed it. I don't know, but it doesn't say. It just says a more exact knowledge. Put them off saying, why wouldn't you say having a more exact knowledge of the way, rule in favor of Paul and release him? And it's because first century Roman politics in Palestine. You have to be very careful. So he put them off. That's very real. That's very true to life right there, saying, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, he was the tribune, the commander of 1,000 in the Antonia fortress. I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the Senate. That will never happen. We'll never see Lysias come back down. So if let's just say this didn't happen and this is being fabricated, why would you put that part in the statement? A thing that never happened. Why would you make that up and just put it in the? No. I'm saying, let's just say this is false. None of this really happened. The Christians invented this story 30 years later. Why would you invent that part of the statement? Because Lysias, it's not like in just a minute Lysias is coming down to give his testimony. He never shows up. And in the case is never decided. So why would you make that part up? The answer is you wouldn't make that part up. Very, very, very authentic sounding. Then he gave orders to the centurion for him to be kept in custody and yet have some freedom, not to prevent any of his friends from ministering to him. So it's a somewhat flattering, somewhat positive portrayal of a Roman governor, which also Pontius Pilate had. Pontius Pilate was a brute, but he wasn't, you wouldn't necessarily know that from the stories about him in Luke. And you wouldn't necessarily know that Felix was a brute by the stories that you see in Acts. Some days later, Felix arrived with Drusilla, his wife, who was a Jewess. That's how things went. Sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. So there it is, that interest. And as he was discussing righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, and pick those three for the governor, Felix, we would just want to talk about faith in Jesus. We probably wouldn't. We would think we were being bold and courageous by talking about faith in Jesus. Paul goes before the Roman governor and he talks about righteousness, self-control, and judgment to come. Wow. Felix became frightened, said, go away for the present. I will find time. When I find time, I will summon you. There's in some of the manuscripts, Drusilla is the one who's particularly interested in what Paul has to say. It's not recorded in this Alexandrian text that we use. Remember the story in John. Is it which gospel is it where Pilate's wife sends him a message while he's sitting on the throne, on the judgment seat? Have nothing to do with this man because I suffered terribly in a dream about him last night. So there's a wife there too in that trial scene. There's the Roman governor and the wife. And afterward, he's afraid. And so he's trying to get Jesus released. And you have a kind of a similar dynamic going on here too. You have a governor with the wife, and the governor is afraid, and he doesn't want to run afoul of Paul. So he procrastinates. That's the other thing you can do. You can do what Pilate did and just give in, or you can do what Felix did and try to wait the situation out. And maybe if you wait long enough, they just lose interest in the thing. At the same time, too, he was hoping that money would be given him by Paul. Therefore, also he also used to send for him quite often and converse with him. Why would he think Paul had money? Why would he think Paul had money? He brought money, the collection for the saints. He's already said it. I came here to give money to the church in Jerusalem. Felix is over there going, well, if you have money for them, you know, this might go a lot easier if you take some of that money and divert it over to me. Because this guy was big on bribes. What can you give me? There's this statement, there's a period of time in Illinois within the last 10 years. There's a period of time in Illinois in the last 10 years that there were actually 2 Illinois governors in prison, one Republican and one Democrat. And the second one, when Obama became the candidate for president, there's an open Senate seat, which the governor, I think the governor fills until the next election. And there's a phone conversation between him and somebody, and they're talking about who's going to fill that seat, that vacancy. And the governor says, well, I'm not just going to give it away for nothing. Which sounds shocking to us, but that mode of operation is at least 2,000 years old. So yeah, but you know, Paul, I heard you have some money. This might go a lot easier if some of that money found its way to me. What do you think? We can just make this whole problem go away. Because, you know, Felix is thinking, this is not risk-free for me. This can go south for me very easily with these Jews. So I'm not going to just do this. But after 2 years had passed, Felix, let's see, Felix was succeeded by Porcius, however you say that. The English mouth wants to say Porcius, but I think it's probably Porcius. Festus, and wishing to do the Jews a favor, he left Paul in prison. There it is. He doesn't want to, he's leaving because he's in trouble.
And that guy never showed up.
Which guy?
The, Lysias,
And Lysias never showed up. That's correct.
2 years.
That's right. Yep. Or he did, and nobody was interested. Luke just wasn't interested in recording it. It's not an interesting part of the story. So we'll talk about Festus next time. Festus will bring in Agrippa II and his wife Bernice. I don't think you get to be a governor by being a wimp. I mean, he's trying to navigate Roman politics and Palestinian politics, Judean politics, and he's being very careful about it because he's leaving because he's been deposed. So he does not want the Jews going back and argue. I mean, you could go back and try to argue for his execution. They can go back to Rome and cause him trouble in Rome, but they don't, you know. At this point, he probably just wants to be done with this.
He can't do anything about it.
He can't do anything about it yet. So it's going to be vacant for 2 years. And then Festus is going to come in 60 AD. And there'll be immediately, from the narrative standpoint, another trial with Bernice, with Agrippa II, who was king of Galilee. I got to go look at this again. I lose track of this stuff. Yeah. And his wife, Bernice. Was Bernice his sister? I think Bernice might have been his sister. But anyway. And his sister. I'll hunt that down. There's some weird thing with this. Yeah. Just a minute.
Not right.
That's probably a dangerous thing to do. I'm not going to do that. Don't do searches at church. All right, thanks.